Spaceflight is exciting, has been from the very beginning, but now we have a lot more to look forward to. Government-funded spaceflight like NASA has been re-energized by the private sector with SpaceX and many other companies. So if you are a fan of space exploration in general, or SpaceX in particular, it's a great time to be alive. Right now, there are so many brilliant and enthusiastic people working in spaceflight in both the private and public sectors. But Elon Musk stands out with his vision for the exploration and habitation of Mars and beyond. This video is about where Elon's vision is being realized here on Earth. SpaceX has major facilities in 3 states: California, Texas, and Florida. Let's start with California, which is where SpaceX is headquartered. SpaceX is headquartered in Hawthorne, California. This building we are zooming into is SpaceX headquarters. Check out the X made with solar panels on the roof. Before we take a good look around Hawthorne, let's get a feel for where SpaceX is located within the vast LA metro area. SpaceX is just across the street from Hawthorne Municipal Airport, which Elon Musk uses on a regular basis for his private jets. LAX is just 5 miles northwest of SpaceX, which is also convenient for travel. Now let's fly up to Hollywood, which is 32 kilometers or 20 miles northeast of SpaceX. Why Hollywood? Well, Elon Musk has made a few cameos in Hollywood movies. My favorite is Iron Man 2, where Tony Stark compliments Elon on his Merlin engines.
Great, make it us.
Okay. Mr. Musk, how are you?
Congratulations on the promotion.
Thank you very much.
Hey, those Merlin engines are fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, good idea for an electric jet.
You do?
Yeah.
Then we'll make it work.
Now let's take a little hop over to downtown LA, which is 22 kilometers or 14 miles northeast of SpaceX. And finally, SoFi Stadium, home to the Rams and Chargers, which is only 3.5 miles north of SpaceX. And now we're back to headquarters on One Rocket Road in Hawthorne. HQ isn't just for offices. It contains mission control and production facilities for most of the spacecraft, boosters, and engines. Both the Crew Dragon and Cargo Dragon spacecraft are made and tested here in various clean rooms. All engines except for the Sea Level Raptor are currently being made here. The Raptor engine is used on the first and second stages of Starship, which we will detail later in this video. The Merlin engine is used on the first and second stages of Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. The Super Draco abort rockets are used on Crew Dragon to get the crew to safety if necessary. And the Draco maneuvering thrusters for both the Crew and Cargo Dragon are made here. The boosters that are made here are the first and second stage of the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launch vehicles. While this facility isn't open to the public, you can still get a close-up view of a bit of SpaceX history because booster B-1019 is on display outside. B-1019 is significant because it was the first booster to land successfully back on Earth after an orbital mission. Now let's take a look at a few of the other SpaceX buildings nearby. Just south of HQ is the SpaceX Tooling Building. To the southeast is SpaceX Wilkie, and to the southwest is SpaceX Charisse. All these buildings contribute to the engineering and manufacturing of SpaceX vehicles. We have now covered the main buildings, but SpaceX has leased more buildings in Hawthorne, totaling over 3 million square feet. And SpaceX plans to continue its expansion in Hawthorne to take advantage of all the aerospace engineering talent in Southern California. Before we move on, and just as a side note, this is the location of the original HQ in El Segundo in 2002. I'll let Elon explain his humble beginnings.
Just to show you where we started off, in 2002, SpaceX basically consisted of carpet and a mariachi band. That was it. That's all of SpaceX in 2002. As you can see, I'm a dancing machine.
Now that we have Hawthorne covered, let's fly 163 miles northwest to Vandenberg Space Force Base. As we fly to Vandenberg, let's get a little history lesson about the base, which is now under the command of the U.S. Space Force. In September 1941, shortly before World War II, 86,000 acres of ranch land was acquired to be used as an Army training facility called Camp Cooke. Camp Cooke was an excellent training ground for tank, artillery, and infantry troops, and was used extensively during World War II and the Korean War. In 1957, Camp Cooke was renamed Cooke Air Force Base and transferred from the Army to the Air Force. In 1958, Cooke Air Force Base was renamed Vandenberg Air Force Base, and in 2021, it was renamed Vandenberg Space Force Base to better align with its current and future role as a space launch facility. The first missile launch occurred on the 15th of December, 1958, with the launch of a Thor missile, and the first launch of the Falcon 9 was in 2013. It looks like we've arrived at Space Launch Complex 4E. This launch complex is dedicated to SpaceX for the Falcon 9 rocket. But before we dive in, let's first take a little look around the base. To the north of Complex 4 is the main base, which houses all the admin and living spaces. The base has a runway, which was lengthened from 8,500 feet to 15,000 feet to accommodate the space shuttle, but the shuttle never landed here. Near the western end of the runway is Space Launch Complex 2, which is leased by Firefly Aerospace. This is where they launched their Alpha rocket. Moving south, we come to Space Launch Complex 3, or SLIC 3, which is operated by United Launch Alliance for their Atlas V launch vehicle. The final launch of the Atlas V from SLIC 3 occurred on November 10th, 2022, to be replaced by their Vulcan rocket. The first launch of the Vulcan was anticipated this year in 2023. But due to delays, the first launch is now expected for 2025. We're now back to Space Launch Complex 4, or SLIC 4, which has two pads. The east pad is for launching, and the west pad is for landing Falcon 9. SpaceX began refurbishing this launch complex in 2011. The first launch of the Falcon 9 from SLIC 4 occurred on September 9th, 2013. It was a Falcon 9 version 1.1 on booster B1013, carrying the Cassiope satellite for the Canadian Space Agency. As of this video, the most recent launch was a Falcon 9 Block 5, carrying Starlink satellites for SpaceX. Now let's take a look at Space Launch Complex 6, or SLIC 6. The history of this site is very interesting, to say the least. This site was originally developed in 1966, but the first launch occurred almost 30 years later, in 1995. In a never-ending process of building up and tearing down, this site was repurposed 3 times. First for the Titan III, then for the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, and then for the Space Shuttle, none of which flew from SLIC 6. In fact, $4 billion was spent to prepare the site for shuttle launches, but NASA canceled after the Challenger disaster for various reasons, including cost overruns. ULA flew the Delta IV from SLIC 6 between 1999 and 2022. The last Delta IV to launch was on September 24th, 2022. Before it was turned over to SpaceX, who is now leasing SLIC 6 for both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. The first launch for Falcon 9 is slated for 2025 and for Falcon Heavy, 2026. Vandenberg is the preferred launch site in the United States for payloads that require polar orbits. Anytime SpaceX needs to put satellites into polar orbits, they will choose Vandenberg, so as not to incur the payload penalty from launching on the East Coast. For this reason, Vandenberg will continue to be an important facility for SpaceX well into the future. Now we are flying from the West Coast to the East Coast, to the two big kahunas of launch sites, Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral. There are 2 launch authorities on the East Coast of Florida. The most famous is Kennedy Space Center, which operates 2 active launch complexes, LC-39A and LC-39B. The second authority is Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which has 3 active launch complexes, SLC-41, 40, and 37. I will cover all 5 launch complexes in this video and what company is leasing them and for what launch vehicles. Kennedy Space Center is famous for the Apollo and Shuttle programs, as well as the current Artemis program. The first Saturn V launch was Apollo 4 in 1967, and the last was Apollo 17 in 1972. Both launched from LC-39A. In fact, all Apollo launches were from 39A except Apollo 10, which launched from 39B. The first space shuttle mission was STS-1 in 1981, and the final mission was STS-135 in 2011, both from LC-39A. The first Artemis launch occurred on November 16, 2022, using 39B, which it will use exclusively throughout the program for years to come. Let's now turn to SpaceX, which leases one launch complex from Kennedy Space Center. That pad is LC-39A, and it is used for both the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, and for future Starship launches. SpaceX is currently building a Starship launch complex about 1,000 feet east of the current pad. A new launch complex has also been proposed called LC-49. That would be built north of LC-39B for Starship as well. In 2013, both SpaceX and Blue Origin submitted competing bids for the use of 39A, but NASA selected SpaceX over Blue Origin. The historic first SpaceX launch from Pad 39A occurred on February 19, 2017. A cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station using a Falcon 9. 1 year later, on February 6, 2018, the first launch of the Falcon Heavy from 39A occurred when Elon Musk launched his personal Tesla Roadster as a payload. SpaceX can launch manned missions from 39A because there is a crew access tower with a crew access arm. A safe distance from the pad is the horizontal integration facility, sitting on what used to be the crawlerway for 39A. This is where the engines, the first and second stages, and the payload are horizontally integrated. Once integrated, the rocket stack is transported to the launch pad via the transporter erector, which is then lifted in place. Now let's check out Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which is just south of Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX leases Space Launch Complex 40, or Slick 40 for the Falcon 9. The first SpaceX launch from Slick 40 was a Falcon 9 version 1.0 on June 4, 2010, as part of the Falcon Qualification Unit. United Launch Alliance leases both Space Launch Complexes 37 and 41 for their Delta IV and Atlas V launch vehicles, respectively, soon to be replaced by the Vulcan rocket, which is under development. Now for what's really cool, SpaceX's propulsive landings of the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy boosters. The landings occur here, in what used to be Space Launch Complex 13, and is now called Landing Zones 1 and 2. Why 2 landing zones? Well, it's because both side boosters from the Falcon Heavy land at the same time, which is truly a sight to behold. Both Kennedy and Cape Canaveral have been important launch sites since the 1960s, but they are just as important now as they have ever been, with planned missions to the Moon and Mars just on the horizon. You might be asking yourself, where does SpaceX perform the research and development of new and existing rocket engines? I'm glad you asked, because much of the R&D of new and existing rocket engines is still done at the Hawthorne, California headquarters. But a good deal of the development now occurs at SpaceX's facility in McGregor, Texas. Along with research and development comes testing. Rocket engines are tested for a couple of reasons based on their development phase. Engines in the R&D phase are tested after each change or iteration in the design process, and engines that have reached serial production also need to be tested before each flight to assure proper function. Most rocket engines, regardless of the launch site, are tested at McGregor. Before we move on, let's get a little history about the McGregor site. This site started out as an ordnance plant during World War II called the Blue Bonnet Ordnance Plant, after the Texas State Flower. At the height of the war, the plant employed 5,000 workers and produced a quarter of all the bombs made by the United States during the war. After the war, the plant was retooled to produce solid rocket propellant for military applications like the Sidewinder air-to-air missile. Even before SpaceX, this site was used to test rocket engines by various companies including Rocketdyne, Hercules, and Beale Aerospace. In fact, SpaceX still uses some of the test stands built by Beale, including the iconic tripod test stand. The test stands are in constant use, given the production rate and launch schedule at SpaceX. For example, McGregor has 5 test stands for the Raptor engine alone. 2 are horizontal test stands and 3 are vertical. Horizontal test stands don't require flame diverters, since the thrust is directed horizontally. However, the 3 vertical test stands provide a more realistic test of how the engines will actually behave during launch. The first time a Merlin engine was tested at McGregor was on November 23, 2008, and thousands have been tested since then. SpaceX's history at the site dates back to 2003, only a year after the company was established, when they purchased 256 acres of land, representing just the core testing sites. Since 2003, SpaceX has expanded from those initial 256 acres to over 4,300 acres to keep up with demand. And just as significant, they have built a new Raptor production factory to augment Hawthorne production. SpaceX's rocket engine production rate is truly impressive. SpaceX is predicted to build between 2 to 4 Raptors per day at McGregor, or between 800 and 1,000 per year. Also, the rapid development of the Raptor engine from versions 1, 2, and 3 can be credited in large part to the fast-paced iterations at the McGregor facility. Now let's check out where Raptor engines are put to use. Well, in my humble opinion, we saved the best SpaceX facility for last. It's called Starbase, and it's located at Boca Chica, Texas. It's the most interesting facility because this is where they build Starship. Starship is unlike any spacecraft that has come before it. It is bigger, heavier, and more capable than even the mighty Saturn V that took mankind to the moon. I will go into much more detail regarding Starship in future videos, but for now, let's check out where Starship is built and launched. Boca Chica is about as far south as you can get in the state of Texas. It's only a couple of miles north of the U.S.-Mexico border. As we approach Starbase, you'll see 2 sites, the launch site and the build site. Not surprisingly, the launch site is where Starship is launched, and the build site is where it's built. I will go into more detail about these 2 sites a little later, but let's first take a look around the area. The launch site is only about 5 kilometers or 3 miles north of the Rio Grande River. The Rio Grande is the border between U.S. and Mexico in the state of Texas. It has its headwaters in the states of Colorado and New Mexico, and is about 3,000 kilometers or 1,900 miles long, being the 4th longest river in the U.S. The city of Brownsville is only 32 kilometers or 20 miles west of Starbase. Brownsville is a city of 186,000 and where a lot of Starbase employees live. Just across the Rio Grande River is the Mexican city of Matamoros. Matamoros has a population of 520,000. The estimated economic benefit for Brownsville and Cameron County is significant. In 2021, it was estimated to be $430 million. And in 2022, it was estimated to be $855 million. Of course, the influx of money and people coming in drives up the demand for real estate. and prices rise, which can be both good and bad. Brownsville has an international airport which is convenient for Elon Musk and his management team, who make frequent trips in their fleet of private jets. Now let's return to the coast and check out the best places to witness a Starship launch in person. There are two small towns to the north of the launch site, South Padre Island and Port Isabel. South Padre Island is about 5 miles north, and Port Isabel is about 6 miles northwest of the launch site. A third site is called Rocket Ranch, which is a private area only 3 miles southwest of the launch site, but you need to book a reservation. Now let's check out the build site. The build site is where both stages of Starship are built. The high bay is mostly used to assemble the Starship upper stage, also called the ship, while the two mega bays are used to assemble the super heavy first stage called the booster. Star Factory fabricates the ring components for both stages, which are then stacked and welded vertically in the bays. Tents 1, 2, and 3 are being replaced by Star Factory. As of this video, only Tent 3, also called the Starship Nose Cone Tent, remains. The Sanchez site is where infrastructure like transportation stands and welding jigs are built. The Rocket Garden is also located at the Sanchez site, where they store both the ships and the boosters that are in various phases of assembly. Launch control is located here, near the high bay. The windows have really rattled during the 2 test launches that have already occurred in 2023. In this video, we are looking east toward the build site. You can see Mega Bay 1 under construction, and in the Rocket Garden, 3 ships and 1 booster. And off in the distance is the launch site near the coast. Google Earth hasn't modeled Starbase with 3D buildings yet, so I have added my own simple shapes for the tower and mount. The launch site is separated into 2 sections: the suborbital launch site and the orbital launch site. The suborbital launch site is where SpaceX performs static fire tests of the engines, but sometimes they do fly, as we have seen. The tests are performed here at suborbital pads A and B. SpaceX demolished pad A, so only pad B remains. It is likely that Starship static tests will be moved to Massey's test site, so as not to close Highway 4 so frequently. Here is the suborbital tank farm that supplies the cryogenic fuel for the tests. Raptor engines are powered by liquid oxygen and liquid methane, also called methalox. The orbital launch site is where actual launches take place, and also where static fire tests of the 33 Raptors on the booster are performed. And here is the orbital tank farm with larger tanks, so that both the ship and booster can be fueled at the same time. The launch tower is 146 meters or 480 feet tall, and is also called Mechazilla when you include the chopsticks and quick disconnect arm. The first and second stages are vertically integrated here at the launch site using the chopsticks. Starship sits firmly on the orbital launch mount here. Let's enjoy a little montage of the various activities that occur at the build site, courtesy of SpaceX. Let's now take a look at the first two integrated launch tests of Starship that occurred in 2023.
Stage one.
Good morning. On your screen is Starship as it awaits our first ever integrated flight test from Starbase Texas.
Flight directors, go for flight. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Ignition. 2, 1. We have liftoff.
Starship vehicle, tower clear, we're into pitch over. Onboard view from Starship. What a sight! We're flying at twice the thrust of the Saturn V heading to space.
Execute. That's another engine.
And there, as you saw, as we promised, an exciting end to the Starship inaugural integrated test flight.
Attention all operators on countdown 1. This is the final go, no go for flight 2 of Starship. Again, our T0 is at 7 a.m. Central. Raptor 1.
Go.
Raptor 2.
Go.
Stage 1.
Go.
Stage 2.
Go.
Copy, go for flight. Clock is rolling. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Booster engine cut off. Stage separation.
Even though both tests ended in rapid unscheduled disassemblies, or RUDs, both integrated launch tests were successes. Test 1's main goal was to get off the launch pad, and that happened. Test 2's main goal was to test hot staging, and that happened. The ultimate goal for both tests was a suborbital flight touching down in the Pacific Ocean north of Hawaii, and Test Launch 3 in 2024 has a very good chance of doing just that. So to sum it all up, we have seen SpaceX's headquarters at Hawthorne, the launch sites at Vandenberg, as well as Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We checked out the engine testing facility at McGregor, and we saved the best for last at Starbase in Boca Chica, Texas. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is my first space industry video, and I hope it will be the start of many more to come. So subscribe if you liked the video and want to see more like this one in the future. May 2024 be a great year for you and for the ambitious and exciting goals for the entire space industry, as we look forward to seeing permanent human habitats on the Moon and Mars in the coming decades.